So let's get to accessibility testing. What's our agenda today? Well, first of all, we will talk a little bit about accessibility and testing in general. Then we check out some standards and what new regulations we have in the EU. Then we will check how people navigate the internet. The fourth part will be tools for accessibility testing, and I will show some of my favorites. And then in the end, I have some few general tips for free what to consider when designing web pages. But first of all, who am I? Well, my name is Lenka Junová. I consider myself an everlasting student of various things. Actually, I work as a so-called hill tester. I work on hardware in the loop in automotive. And I'm also many other things like coffee addict, older sibling, avid listener of metal, and many more things. And why do I care actually about accessibility testing? Well, I have interest in the usability and user experience in general. I always do something that is rather beneficial than just work for money. I have background in social sciences. I work with people from various social cultural backgrounds, and it taught me that the ability to view things from different perspectives is a really important skill. And also, I think accessibility testing challenges my views on how people access, perceive, and operate websites and apps. And also, I have ADHD. So I apologize in advance if I start speaking too quickly or if I just go to some tangent. Even I experience issues stemming from my hyperactivity and problems with focus regulation. So I would really prefer the online world to be more accessible too. So let's get to part one. Accessibility testing and why it's all important. I would like to start with my favorite quote. The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. That's a quote by who I call the founder of all things internet, Timothy Berners-Lee. He was the inventor of things like World Wide Web, HTTP, URL, HTML. The term accessibility can have many meanings and definitions, and I just chose these three as some example. For example, Cambridge Dictionary says that accessibility is the fact of being able to be reached or obtained easily, the quality of being able to be entered or used by everyone, including people who have disability, or the quality of being easy to understand or enjoy. The World Wide Web Consortium says that the web is fundamentally designed to work for all people, whatever their hardware, software, language, location, or ability. When the web meets this goal, it's accessible to people with a diverse range of hearing, movement, sight, and cognitive ability. And MDN says that accessibility is the practice of making your website usable by as many people as possible. We traditionally think of it as being about people with disabilities, but the practice of making sites accessible also benefits other groups, such as those using mobile devices or those with slow network connections. You might also think of accessibility as treating everyone the same and giving them equal opportunities, no matter what their ability or circumstances. So, why is accessibility important? Why we all should care, that is the big question. First of all, I personally think that we all should have some empathy. It's a really nice and good thing to have. Then, accessibility is not some special need or some bonus. I think it's a human right, we all should have it. Also, I think that people in IT are sometimes in sort of in a bubble. And what do I mean by this is that the fact that sometimes we forget that people outside of IT do not have the same level of understanding of technology, the way of thinking we have. What makes sense to us may be hard to understand or use for others. For example, I have people in my own family that barely operate a phone, let alone some computer. And once people use some service or some product, they just expect that it will work. They are not expected to really think hard about it or figure out what to do. Also, you do not need permanent disability to use assistive technologies and accessible apps. For example, you can be fatigued, you can be caring for a small child and just holding the child in one hand and just have the other hand to operate everything. You can be outside and the sun is shining too much and you don't see your screen. The fact is also that the population is aging. and we need to be ready for that. It's something that it's not avoidable. And also both manual labor and office jobs can cause some specific health issues that can actually play into how people interact with internet and devices in general. Usually people have some limited motor movements, or they can have worse eyesight, worse hearing. They can have chronic issues from assembling parts. And I think everyone benefits from more accessible websites. It's just easier to use for everyone. Adding accessibility into things doesn't mean that other people will have it somehow harder. And of course, it's good for business. Every business wants new customers or clients, and people actually won't go back to something that's hard to use if there are better options out there. So it's even important for business. And to reiterate, with accessibility, we can gain inclusivity, enhanced user experience, positive brand image, improved CEO, risk mitigate, which is also important for businesses and services. And of course, we fulfill some legal and ethical responsibilities. Regarding businesses, accessibility means that there is more space for innovation. There are potential new customers and clients, especially loyal customers. Once people with disabilities find something that works for them, they will really use it. They don't have the incentive to go somewhere else. There is also competitive advantage, of course, if your competitors are lacking in all these features. If their websites don't work well, if their e-commerce website is too chaotic, you come on top. And also there is this compliance with legal requirements. No company wants to pay for some penalties. Let's check quickly some numbers. So here are some statistics. The WHO thinks that approximately 16% of world population has some disability. In case of Czech Republic, it's estimated to 13% of people. Of course, a big portion of these percentages are elderly, and aging population is something we need to really think about. It's important to see how the population is distributed by age in your target country when it comes to somebody who provides some business. This is example of Czech Republic. And if we watch the actually fully colored lines, that's the numbers for 2022. And you can actually see how there is big divide between the people who are under 30 and from 30 plus, which is the active population, the adults who are supposed to work, make money, spend money for things. So we have to keep in mind that all those 30 plus people will need more accessible web apps soon, not just for leisure or hobbies or just shopping, but they will also need it for work and for administration, because these days barely anything can be done without web or an app or without phone. And here's some division of types of disabilities. I found many ways to describe or divide the types, and I just decided to stick to these basic categories. First, there are visual disabilities, which is typically legally blind people, colorblind people, people who has issues like as they see flickers in their eyes or they see just partially. They have cataract, for example. Then hearing disabilities, various levels of hearing impairment. And there are motor disabilities, which is what usually comes into mind when speaking about disabilities, people who need to use wheelchair usually. Some people are missing limbs, some people have poor fine motor skills, some people are paralyzed. Then we have neurological and cognitive disabilities. I consider them sort of together because they really interplay. So these are congenital syndromes, brain injuries, cerebral palsy is a common example. But also regarding the cognitive side of things, there's many learning disorders, usually dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and also, of course, ADHD and various forms of autism, mental disabilities. And there is also a category of temporary disabilities. You can imagine someone who just broke both of their arms and then can't use them for a long time. Or someone who just got ear infection and now it's difficult for them to focus on computer, to actually move around here and stuff like that. So these are kind of disabilities that can get better with time. There are operations to do and things like that. And also, when thinking about disabilities, it's really important to consider the fact that people can have and will have multiple issues or multiple types of disabilities. So it's not like somebody is just blind. Somebody can be blind, but also they can partially lose their hearing. Or somebody can have poor eyesight, they still see something, but they also have really bad motor skills. So we have to design things in the way we think about these interconnections, because sometimes it can happen that people design websites in a way that, okay, this function is for blind people, but it turns off or negates another function for people who, for example, need some assistance with motor functions. So it's important not to accidentally exclude some groups. And now the main part, since we just covered the basics. What exactly is accessibility testing? Simply said, it can be a software testing method to ensure that mobile and web applications are usable for all groups of people, including people with disabilities. So yeah, it's quite simple, no rocket science there. But where to start? So, in general, we should consider accessibility audit to check the current state of things in our company or organization. And we should also consider UX design of our website, our products. UX research is important, and the notion of universal design, which means that's a design that's suitable for everybody, regardless of disability, essentially. I said it because it's always better to have accessibility sort of baked into the solutions in the first place, rather than just having to retrofit it somehow later. And then, of course, we have accessibility testing. Either you can test yourself, you can create new position, hire an accessibility tester, or you can hire a company focused on accessibility or accessibility testing in particular that will help you with the transition. And most importantly, you have to educate everyone involved in creation of your product. You have to raise awareness about disabilities, about various ways of access, about various ways of communication, because accessibility is not the responsibility of one person. That's crucial. Everyone needs to consider it when working. Your managers, your designers, sales and marketing, programmers, testers, customer support, everyone needs to be aware of it. It doesn't help if just one person in the company knows something about accessibility or is solving accessibility. It needs to be an essential part of your business. Now we have some main types of accessibility testing. We have automatic testing, manual testing, functional testing, visual testing, cross-browser and cross-platform testing. Pardon. Well, automatic testing is what it says on the tin. We all use it. We're just using the various tools that will help to scan the content, identify potential issues, some tools that can analyze things. Manual testing, well, that's what we all know very well. Just people looking into things, trying to figure out what's happening, analyzing things. It's a really important part of accessibility testing. Computers can do everything for us. Functional testing is focused on the particular functions, how the products and services will work from the accessibility perspective, if the essential tasks and access key features will work actually, and if they work effectively. So it's considered mainly with navigation on the sites, if the if form controls are okay, if all the interactive elements work, if the multimedia content is actually suitable, and all of these aspects. Then there is visual testing. Visual testing examines the design, the presentation of the digital content, and it's especially important for people with low vision or color blindness. So you have to ensure and assess that you have good color contrast, that the font size and style is suitable, that the text is actually readable, that it's not too complicated or too long, if the layout is structured well, if there is a good visual hierarchy when somebody arrives to your page. It's a really important part of testing. And of course, cross-browser and cross-platform testing involves testing against like various different types of web browsers, operating systems, but also technologies or even specialized software, because there can be many versions or many types for different operating systems. So let's move to second part. Well, standards and new regulations that we are facing. In the European Union, we have two main directives ruling currently over the accessibility landscape. When it comes to the legal world, first is the Web Accessibility Directive 2016/2102, which is focused more on public sector. And now we are mainly considered with the European Accessibility Act, EAA, which is Directive 2019/882 on the accessibility requirements for products and services. And it's important because it covers both people with disability and the elderly, and all EU member states must ensure the implementation of accessibility measures by June 28, 2025, which is kind of soon. And there is also EU norm, EN 301549, which is European standard for accessibility requirements for ICT products and services in the EU. I would recommend just list through that too, because it's expected to be applicable standard in general across EU. And of course, every member country of the EU should transpose all these directives into their national laws. In case of Czech Republic, the main law considering this accessibility is the law 99/2019 of Legal Code and its later versions. When it comes to products affected by the European Accessibility Act, well, it regards almost everything. Websites, e-commerce, computers, operating systems, ticketing and check-in machines, telephone services, television broadcasts in some way, services related to travel, e-books, banking services. So in summer 2025, we should all have accessibility embedded in our systems, I think. That's the key thing. And you notice when you read through some of the legislation, either in your own country or the European ones, that the accessibility laws are heavily inspired by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines or even guided. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or so some people call them WCAG or WCAG, they are actively developed by Worldwide Web Consortium in cooperation with various individuals and organizations. They were created and are actively evolving since the 90s. And currently, the legislation requires the WCAG 2.1, but we also have in use WCAG 2.2 already, and I would recommend rather use this one. So we wouldn't have to actually abruptly change anything later if the legislators decide to update something. There is also WCAG 3 currently in works, but it will take many years to actually prepare and finish because they want to overhaul some of the structure and functions. And also it's nice and good to have some accessibility guidelines, but also it's important thing to keep in mind that WCAG is just a good start. I would not consider it the finish line to your efforts. Always think about ways you can improve. So web content accessibility guidelines have 4 main principles. These are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Usually people say here that you have poor because it's the acronym. So perceivable means that the information and interface must be perceivable to all users, so you cannot use just one sense. Operable means that the interface and components and the navigation must be operable by all users, so you have to have option to have many ways of inputting and outputting the information. Understandable means that the content and user interface components must be understandable by all users. So the navigation, the instructions, the labeling, it must be clear. And robust considers that the content and user interface components must be robust enough to work reliable across devices. That means different technology, different assistive technology, different browsers, operating systems. It's important to keep in mind that not everyone has the latest version of everything. So there is a lot of backwards compatibility in play. And furthermore, BCAG has 3 levels that indicate conformance to the guidelines. The first is A, which is like a minimum level. That's what we must have. That's the bare minimum. Then you have AA, which is sort of mid-range. What we should have, we should strive at least for this. And then you have AAA, which is the highest level, and that's rather good to have things because these are a bit more difficult to actually ensure. So it's not like obligatory or something, but it will be good if you figured out a way to use it. So the A level mainly is considering the providing of text alternatives to non-text content, that all of the functionality must be operable through the keyboard. That's important. And that content is understandable and readable. Using of simple language is also important, both for people with mental disabilities or cognitive issues. Also, very important is to ensure that content does not cause seizures because it's flashing too much or it's changing too quickly. And it's also important that the instructions do not rely on sensory characteristics only. So write it out or make it accessible to screen reader. So AA level. Here we have sufficient color contrast between text and background elements, which is considered 4.5 to 1. Captions should be pre-recorded. For any audio, video content, well, clear heading is important, labels and instructions. And also it's important that the content is usable and accessible if the user adjusts their own settings, if they need to change the text size some way, if they need to switch color settings to something with even more contrast, magnify something, things like that. And then we have the AAA. There are things like the sign language interpretation for pre-recorded audio content, real-time captions for live audios, or alternative content presentations or navigations, clear instructions and minimize distractions. That's important, I think, especially for me. Ensuring that content is accessible across a wide range of devices and platforms. And color contrast is even pushed to at least 7 to 1. And now that we got through the formalities, let's go into the practical side of things. How people access the internet. So the mainstream technologies, the main thing, we all know it, phones, tablets, desktops, laptops, simple keyboard and mouse. AI assistants can be considered mainstream technologies these days too. But people with disabilities or even people without disabilities sometimes use or have to use assistive technologies. These can be screen readers and text-to-speech software, speech-to-text software, magnifying glass, braille or a haptic keyboard for touch, high-contrast keyboards, keyboards with alternative layouts and shapes, Or there are many alternatives to mouse, like joystick, switch, sip and puff switch, eye control mechanisms. And there are many types. There are many versions, even when it comes to the softwares. There are also many versions for different operating systems, so it's not exactly one size fits all. So here are some examples of AT, Assistive Technologies. So the first one is switch controller. This is used for people who have motor issues. It's usually used by hand or elbow or head. It can be mounted on a wheelchair. And essentially it's just used by pushing this button. And software is actually like scanning a page. And when it reaches a point on the screen the person wants to use, they just push the button and it will focus more and give other options. And then again scan, focus more after they hit the button. So it can take time to navigate, but it's really helpful and it's really commonly used technology. The second picture shows joystick, which is alternative for mouse. The third picture is Braille keyboard for people with poor eyesight or legally blind people, if they know Braille. Not all people know Braille. So this is keyboard with bigger and higher contrast keys, which is really useful for everyone, from people with low vision to elder people, I think, because it's really nice to have big letters that jump out like this. In the middle, we can see eye tracker, which is also used for motor issues, especially if people are paralyzed. It's a kind of panel that is stuck at the bottom of the screen and it monitors your eye and hand movement, and then it acts accordingly when you use attached software. And then on the right, we have gyroscopic mouse that is controlled by head movement. So also useful if somebody has issues with motor functions. And here we have trackball mouse, which is a good alternative. If people don't have the full range of motion and cannot move mouse around so much, they just move this little ball. In the middle, we have logo of some of the most common screen readers. In this case, it's VoiceOver. And on the right, we have special plastic cover that's used for keyboard to assist people with motor issues, because sometimes people have such tremors or such limited movement that it's really hard for them to hit the right key. So this really helps them to navigate across the keyboard and not to push too many keyboards at once. And of course, there's many, many other technologies. This is just a little example. And now, since we mentioned screen readers, how will the screen readers actually interact with the web page? So we have HTML code that is the basis for everything. And it's also basis for so-called DOM tree. DOM is document object model. It's virtual representation of the website and its structure. It interacts with JavaScript. And the purpose of existence of DOM tree is actually to timely update and smoothly update everything what's happening on the web page in the browser. So the DOM tree serves as basis to render the actual visuals of the page, but also it's transformed into so-called accessibility tree. And this accessibility tree is then read by some API, which is accessibility API. There are many different types. And this accessibility API just outputs the presented data to assistive technology. So as you can see in this little graph, there is no really direct connection between what's going on in the graphical user interface and what the assistive technology receives. It's just at the point of the DOM tree, it's divided and it's not the identical information. Also important for screen readers is WAI area, which means Web Accessibility Initiative, Accessibility Rich Internet Applications. Usually people just say ARIA. It's extension to HTML. It adds attributes to signify row, property, and state of the element. And I would repeat, it's not some replacement for HTML, it's extension. It's important for screen readers, especially if there is lack of semantic HTML. I'm sure you already used or saw attributes like row, area described by, area label, area hidden, area required somewhere in the code. So it comes from the days when HTML did not have sufficient semantics and functionality, or did not have some way to purposefully describe what needs to be pointed out on the web page for people who don't see. So it's still used. It's used along HTML5. It's also used because it helps with backwards compatibility for all the technologies and softwares. So please use it. And now, since we talked all this general stuff, there are some most common screen readers, JAWS and NVDA for Windows, VoiceOver for the Apple products, and TalkBack for Android. And now I can try to show you a little bit how they work. I have currently NVDA and TalkBack. NVDA will be probably just in check, but at least you see how it hops around on the side. So I will try to present it. So now it's turned on. And you use mostly tab key and enter and tab and shift to go back and front. And I will do it quickly. So now we are in the browser. And now you see we go through the navigation and it's reading what's happening. And it also tells us how many elements are there in this level of navigation. And I'm just using my tab key. If I would like to go here and, for example, get these for media, I just push enter when it's highlighted. And since you see how slowly it moves and goes through literally everything, you can also think about how your web pages are structured and what you could do to make it easier. So this is how NVIDIA works. And now maybe more interesting will be, yeah, it reads everything. It's not just for the web browser. It will navigate through literally every page, every part of your computer. I will turn it off. Okay. I will go back to the presentation. And now this will be probably here only, but maybe I can turn off for a moment this presentation mode. So now I have some old Android phone. And in Android, you turn TalkBack, which is screen reader, by pushing both volume tabs.
TalkBack zapnuto. Systémový launcher. Aktuální čas 4:41. Klepněte dvakrát pro otevření hodin.
And you have actually...
Aktivujete dvojitým klepnutím. Čtvrtek. Bez vyhledávání.
And you have actually written here that the function TalkBack is turned on. To turn it off, you have to hold for 3 seconds the volume buttons. But I will go through
bez popisu.
some web.
Aktivujete dvojitým klepnutím.
So
Dlouhé stisknutí provedete
it will essentially tell me that if I want to open something, I have to tap twice on when the thing is in focus.
Chrome. Vyhledávejte či zadejte URL. Textové pole 1 z 3. V seznamu 3 položky.
It will
Text
tell me that
upravíte
I'm in the
na
Chrome.
šířku, na výšku. Vyhledávejte či zadejte URL. Textové pole 1 z 6.
I will move around with swiping only from side to side.
Navigovat Facebook m.facebook.com. Navigovat YouTube m.youtube. Vaše poslední karta. Služby Tesena www. Webové
I
zobrazení.
can open
0%.
the Tesena services.
Ukazatel postupu 0%. Služby Tesena. Přímé vyhledávání.
There you have
Hledaný výraz.
direct search
Hledaný
through.
výraz. Textové pole. Zavřít vyhledávání. Výsledek vyhledávání. Seznam.
You will write something, it will find
Vymazat
it on the
vstup.
page.
Tlačítko. Před. Výsledek. Vymazat. Před. Dal. Zavřít vyhledávání.
And
Tlačítko.
if you are in the focus,
Aktivujete
it actually doesn't matter where you are on the page.
Chrome. Otevřít domov. Aplikace Talkback je vypnutá.
It will actually confirm the button anywhere on the phone. So you don't have to navigate on particular part of the phone. It will just tell you if you tap twice, it will turn off, or if you tap twice, it will start searching. So it's really useful that people really do not need to know where it is on the screen of phone. And also you can turn it into other languages if you have the option for your country. And I actually really like to try the talkback one. I hope to try the Apple one too soon, because that's actually also really popular with people with disabilities. Actually, from what I read so far, most people with disabilities read or use screen reader on computer with Windows because they have JAWS or NVDA. And as phones, they often have iPhones, so they use VoiceOver. But the talkbacks is also improving a lot. So I will go back to the presentation. Tak. And here. So tools for accessibility testing. That's probably what everybody wants to know and see. So there are many tools, and I always say the most important one is our brain. So never over rely on some automated tools or on AI and things like that. First of all, we always need to be able to actually check stuff ourselves. And the tools that are commonly used for testing, there are simple keyboard, like the keyboard you use every day. Just use it for testing. Screen readers, they are also usually used for accessibility testing. And then you have automated web page checking tools. You have contrast checkers. You have things like HTML checkers, code linters, CSS validators. There are also many inbuilt accessibility features for any OS, operating systems. For example, magnifying glass. Every operating system has any type of text-to-speech software. So you can also try this. And when it comes to things like screen readers, never use just one type, because all those screen reader softwares can act differently. They can read things differently. So it's better to actually test the cross compatibility. And now these are some of the tools. These are automated tools for overall check. The really known and common one is Wave. I will try to open it. Okay, and I will use site of Tesena. And I'm warning you, we know it's not currently accessible much, but it will get better. Sorry. So this is the browser version. I have also the plugin here, which is actually better to use for your company because it's more private. This is just for general show. So this is how it scans. And here we have some summary that will be filled in. So now we see 30 errors, 23 contrast errors, some alerts. Alerts are things that should be tested rather manually. It's just like this place could have some issues, but we are not able to point out which. Here we have what features we have. Here is structural elements, and here we have what area is used. If we go to the details, then we can actually see all the particular things according to these icons. And you have also order here. So you can see actually what's the navigation order of your page. If you're tabbing through, if you're using screen reader, it will actually indicate in what direction it will move across the page if the reading order is good. And you have also structure here, so you can check where are you standing with your headings, for example. Here you have little contrast tool, you can check the contrast. So this is like the most known checker, I think, these days. Then we have also accessibility insights for web, which I use as a plugin tool. Let's turn it on here. And there will go a pop-up, and it will just again show you what's working, what's not working, what you need to check, things like that. Then another one I like is Assistive Tools. Assistive Tools is actually also a plugin for browser, but it shows up directly in the DevTools section of your browser. So it's quite good if you're used to just checking in your DevTools a lot of time, or if you're good with your DevTools, you know what's happening there, what is what, then that's definitely a good one for you. Of course, Chrome has their own DevTools for Lighthouse. And then I also found interesting plugin A Inspector and Pali, or IP accessibility, which is something that can be used for command line. So if you really love to work in command line, you can download that one. Now there are some contrast checkers. The WebAM contrast checker is probably the most known. Probably everybody saw it already. It looks like this. You just input your foreground and background color. It will tell you how successful you are when it comes to accessibility, how it looks with normal text, with larger text, if the input will be good, if you have some objects. Then I also like, are my colors accessible? That's more funky one, because you put some colors here and it will literally comment. So if you are too bored, then you can try this. See, it will tell you literally if you're okay, if nope, or if you could do better. Then you have who can use. This is a really good one because it actually shows you already which kind of color blindness work well with your choice of font color and background color. So you can see, for example, if person with cataracts, you can see something, person with glaucoma. You can see if it's visible in direct sunlight in night shift mode. So this one is really good too. And then there are others like colors contrast checker. Then I go to contrast finder. That's also a good one. It gives you alternative options for more accessible version if you input your choice. And also I like the Adobe Color analysis of image colors. It's really useful if you need to check colors on your background image when you have some text over it. And you don't actually know what particular colors there are, so you will just upload it into Adobe Color and you can pinpoint the place where you want to see the hex. There are some HTML and CSS services like markup validation service, CSS validation, some linters. Usually the markup validation service is quite known and used, I think. You just input your HTML. It's quite simple. Then we have checklists. Sometimes people don't want to figure out what checklist to use or how to form reports. I find the checklist of LA project is really good if you don't know what particularly to check, both manually and automatically. And then the World Wide Web Consortium has ATEC report tool and WCAG AM report tool, which are also good. And if you want to do accessibility audit, I found a really good Excel file prepared by Rachel DiTullio, which is really like simple Word Excel file that shows you what you should pay attention to, what to comment on, and things like that. You have like what tools you can use, what's the scope, here are all the criterions. So I think that's a good start. And it's really available. I just took it from her site just to show you. I think I will use it for sure in future. And now we have some general tips. So this is the last part of our presentation. First of all, yeah, seems simple, but as I already mentioned, use your brain. No automation will solve it all. It's estimated that automation tool catch around 40 to 60% of accessibility issues. And AI tools are also not really a reliable solution right now. Automated testing is sort of surface level. It will mix any complex interactions, so you still have to check manually. Also with AI tools, they are not really ready for people with disabilities now, and they can hallucinate a lot, so yeah, be careful. Second of all, which is important, you need testers and real-life users. So either test with users, co-design with people with disabilities, that's even better, or even better, employ them. There are professionals in the field of IT and design that have disabilities. Even legally blind people can learn coding. I saw it in some conference. There are people like programmers who actually are legally blind. And this leads to my other tip, which is welcome feedback. Have option for people to give you feedback. People like things to work. They may feel inclined to help if it benefits them. They will want to help if they feel actually listened to. And be aware of ableism, which is discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. If you think about some feature or if something works or doesn't work, just ask yourself if somebody says that, for example, blind people do not need this feature. Would you say the same thing about, for example, women? Do them not know the future? The immigrants don't need the future. If you can't say yes for all of them, then that's probably a little ableist. Like everybody needs more or less the same features. So, and 4, test regularly. I know it seems obvious, but accessibility is not one-time thing. It's testing like any other. So everything is evolving. you need to actually work on everything again and again, refactor. So do not forget to test regularly. Also, do not forget cross-compatibility, and especially pay attention to integration with third-party products or services. You can have the most accessible, wonderful web on the world, but if the third-party product or some component won't be accessible at all, it still tarnishes your reputation. People won't use your website as much. They won't like to use it. And here are some common mistakes. That's actually the last part. Tak. Semantic HTML. Try to use it properly, like main for the main part, footer for the footer, things like that. Do not heavily rely on divs and spans because they have no actual inbuilt accessibility in them. If you need to use them, use ARIA with them at least. Headings, never skip levels in headings and do not change the order of the headings. Always H1, H2, H3, H4, 5, 6, because it's a main navigation feature. So do not make a bigger mess of your page navigation than it has to be. Images, this is often a common problem. There is no alternative text, alt, or wrong description. If you have no alternative text, then what usually the screen reader does is it tries to find some text, and it usually finds the name of the file. And then the people just hear file 123.jpg, and that's no use for them. So if you have a decorative image and you don't want to have description there because it's not essential for use, then just use the alt attribute and keep it empty. Just alt / and empty quotes. It's so much better than using no alternative text. And when it comes to wrong description, sometimes people tend to describe just what's happening on the picture. But if the pictures are related to some navigation, to some buttons, links, then rather describe what's the purpose of it. What's the function? For example, if you have Facebook icon, you need to write alt text, share on Facebook or things like that. So the blind person knows actually what's the purpose. Graphs, keep them simple, add some summary, and do not only rely on colors, keep some text there so colorblind people can distinguish what's happening on ARIA. Make sure you use it correctly, because wrongly used ARIA can be actually more harmful than if you don't use any. It can make quite mess. Drag and drop, always have alternatives because some people do not have the motor functions to actually effectively use it. So let's not exclude them. Buttons and links. Target size is important. Sometimes when the buttons are too small, too close together, like for example, OK and cancel, that can be really difficult for somebody like with tremors or poor fine motor movement, or even somebody blind to actually hit the right one. Colors, of course, important. We should know that we are on this button or on this link. We should know if it was used when it comes to links. And also, what is really important, they must make sense out of context. Sometimes there are these simple descriptions like buy now, click here, read more. But if it's, for example, e-commerce site, and there are many on this page, and the blind person just here's buy now. What? What are they buying? They have no idea what they should click for. Or click here. Why? Why should I click? Where it will lead me? Read more. About what? Like, don't use these simple descriptors, like, at least add them in the form of ARIA. Add some better description. Reading flow. That's what I mentioned already. You should be able to easily tap through your page. There should be some logical order to how you tap through your page. It's not good when you start at the header, you are in the navigation, and then you tap, and suddenly you're somewhere in the footer, then you're suddenly somewhere in the main part, then somewhere in the navigation again. That's not website that will be used by people with disabilities. frankly. So always pay attention if the reading flow makes sense. That also applies for tables. If you have tables, make sure that you're not jumping with the focus everywhere. Headers and rows and columns should also exist. People need to know what is the name of the row, what is the name of the column. They need to know what kind of data it is. Skip links. I do not see them that often, I think, in Czech Republic yet, but they are really useful. These are links that are not visible on the visual version of the website for everyone. They are visible to screen readers. And it just gives people the option to just do not go through all the various navigation at the header part, but just to skip to the main content. For example, if they are in some article, the people who don't want to click through like 20 different parts of navigation just to get to one article. It's better if they have the option to skip directly to the first header of the article. Forums, this is important. Any input needs proper label connected to it. Even if there is no visible label, like visible in the visual version of the web page, there should be some area connected hidden one, because people need to know what they're actually filling in, why. Error messages and required fields cannot be indicated with color only. There should be some text, there should be some attributes, area required, so everybody can know that this is something that needs to be filled in so they can move on. Or they need to know that if they don't fill it in correctly, they have to do it again, things like that. Also, do not ask for the same information twice, because people get fatigued, lose focus, or have lower cognitive functions. It's just that's no good if you just ask for the email twice or for the address. It prolongs time for filling in the form. Also, beware of time limits. They just cause unnecessary stress. Also, some people, especially if they are using things like switches or eye trackers, it takes them much longer to type stuff. So either do not use time limits or make some option to prolong them for these people. Just show something like prolong for another, I don't know, 50 minutes. Because, for example, I can make like 100 keystrokes a minute on the keyboard. But if somebody's using some assistive technologies, they can barely get to 60 strokes a minute, sometimes even not that. So keep it in mind. Zoom. We should be able to zoom on web page up to 400%. Do not use fixed sizes. Fixed sizes do not help anybody, because when people try to zoom, nothing zooms and they can't use the web page anyway. Also, good contrast between text and background is crucial, especially if you have background images. And also try to avoid text directly in the image, because that's something that screen reader will never read. So if you have it there, then rather add some good alt. Subtitles and captions are not the same thing, and they are needed. Because even if people with hearing impairments have some hearing aid, it doesn't mean they hear as well as us. They hear just everything in more heightened way. It's more difficult for them to distinguish what they are hearing. So it's not that just they do not hear that clearly as they still will need for almost everything some captions or at least subtitles. Captions give you the context of what's happening. Subtitles is just transcription of what's said. Do not hide focus. That's also a very important one. Everybody should be able to navigate and interact with the page with keyboard. People need to know where they are. They need to see where they are. If you hide the focus, they have no idea. Also, if you hide the focus, the screen reader won't see it too. So that's even more chaotic. Widgets and pop-ups, they are tricky. If you can, try to avoid them or check accessibility thoroughly, because widgets and pop-ups usually hijack the focus. So people are filling out forms, for example, and suddenly some pop-up opens and it will switch from the form to the pop-up with some random text, and then people are frustrated and confused why they can't finish what they did, and they need to figure out how to navigate back. If they are able to navigate back, sometimes it's coded in such a bad way that people can't even turn it off and return back to what they were doing. Also, some widgets can have some own version of sort of screen reader, which is really distracting for people, or they can force the user to turn off their own screen reader so they can use actually the widget. So that's really annoying too. And finally, CAPTCHAs and logical questions are quite a no-no when it comes to accessibility. Rather look for alternatives to authenticate user. They are really not accessible, and even if people pretend like they are accessible versions that you can have a red form of CAPTCHA or something like that, that doesn't work either. So just don't use them, please. I think everybody would thank you. So that's from me, everything.